here. Let me, I have to actually stop the meeting so I can get my buttons. Then the share, then I'll turn it back on. So let me hit record. And Lindsay will start her live broadcast, and now I can put the share back up. Okay, and there we go. Okay, we're still sharing. Okay, here we go.
Great. Okay. So welcome all to the special meeting of the Planning and Zoning. This November 13th at 7 o'clock. We are in meeting. We'll call to order. Sue, if you would call the roll and introduce the guests.
Certainly. Mr. Agnesi.
Present.
Mr. Alley. Mr. Anderson is excused. Mr. Hirsch.
Present.
Mr. Collegian. Mr. Macchio. Mr. Mortimer.
Present.
Mr. Sadie.
Present.
Mr. Zahertis. And Chairman Quish.
I'm here as well. So thank you everyone for coming.
And we do have a special guest tonight is Attorney Amy Suchins.
Great. Thank you for that. So the general discussion, the topic here as written in the agenda is we're addressing CDD2. We're looking at the way the regs are written now and see if we can make any improvements. And I think the main focus is to encourage multi-unit housing and that which includes an affordable component. And a couple of key ways we can maybe address that, if we would like, is the lot size requirements and building height. We are not limited to these, anything that will be a sort of a dive into the existing regs and see if there's room for improvement. I think we're going to try to do this for the other CDD zones in town. I think we'll take them one at a time. And David, you can put the screen share down so we can see everybody, please. So first of all, David, if you would give Amy a little more of an introduction and just to refresh everybody who she is and why we've asked her to join us.
So Amy Suchins is a local attorney with Hurwitz, Sagrin, Schlossberg, and Nuff. She has expertise in, we'll call it all things affordable housing. And when the board had a previous meeting with private sector developers and attorneys to sort of get a sense of the issue on, all sides, Amy made a great presentation, and for that reason, we have invited her back.
And thank you for taking your time, Amy, to join us. So I think it'll be just sort of maybe run through what we have now. The CDD2 permits, I don't know, David, why don't you give us an overview? You can probably speak to it more quickly than I can.
Okay. So, and I can throw up the regs if you want, but basically the CDD2, let me share this very quickly. So many screens, here we go. Okay, share. It has permitted uses, like all zones. So we have a single family permitted use, two family permitted use. Then we have all these commercial uses, blah, 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 commercial. Then we have mixed use buildings containing two more permitted uses. And then we have mixed use buildings containing dwelling units. And this particular regulation is going to be changing, which is that change is circulating right now because we have to get rid of the minimum sizes.
And that's due to a state, that's aligning us with state statute, correct?
Correct. So we will be in alignment with state statute. And then for someone who utilizes this, the total number of bedrooms of whatever it is they're proposing cannot exceed 6.
So right now, why don't we go to these things and say, and collectively think about, do we need no residential use permitted on the ground floor, or can we cross that out? And then go right to number 3 and say, do we want to have anything that restricts the number of units, or can we cross that out just as a start? So if anybody I would advocate for both those 2 changes right off the bat. Does anyone else have thoughts or feelings on that?
I would actually, yeah, I would back up. Number of bedrooms shall not exceed 6. I don't think that makes any sense. I'm with you on that, Jim. Throwing that out for mixed use buildings. If these things aren't getting built right now under these regs, perhaps if we allowed more, they would get built. They'd pencil out better. As far as no residential uses permitted on the ground floor, I mean, it's talking about a mixed use building, so presumably the first floor would be residential or retail rather. So that I think that keeping that one does make sense.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yep.
Who amongst us in the Planning and Zoning Board resides or is within the environs of the CDD2 zone?
Sadie and Quish.
I'd like to hear what they have to say. So I'd like to hear what Sadie thinks and what you think, Quish. That you live there. So what do you think?
I think that I'm okay with the no residential use on the ground floor to be axed. Now, I understand that we may end up changing this to a mixed use and just to we might combine this with multi unit building and eliminate the differentiation between mixed use. And we permit the mixed use, but we don't have any stricter requirements. Or I think there's somewhere where there's a percentage. So you could have, let's say you had a long frontage, you could have some residential on the first floor, but also some commercial. So it wouldn't be totally exclusive. It would be up to the developer. So that's why I would cross that off. I know that we had developments down in Walnut Beach right at the West Shore shoreline, and it was decades and decades before we could get the actual commercial uses filled, just because of that was what the economic conditions were. So anyway, I'm open though. I don't stick my heels in the sand on it.
So I have, a suggestion, and again, it's just, a talking point. I'm not wedded to it. It's just, I'm just throwing this out there. I thought about just getting rid of this whole section and just saying, coming up with a standard for multi-family buildings. And I wrote something up that I could share, and we can take a look at it. Obviously, it can be tweaked any way you like. And
right.
I just have to.
Before that, Mr. Sadie, do you have any thoughts you'd share?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me, Chairman Quish. In reference to your original comments regarding the exclusion of number 2, no residential use, I agree fully, because that's going to be part of a mixed use building, and in some ways it doesn't make sense if we're trying to allow housing into the area. I've listened to John Agnesi's comments. I think that the issue of 6 probably is going to need a little bit more work, because that's 6 per building. And then we have to go back to heights and things like that. So I'm not embracing that yet, but I also, want to point out that we do have a special use, which is that multifamily residential buildings have an affordability component on 30%. And it does, we should look at that also because it talks about how many building units, like that may be for further part of your discussion, Mr. Chair. But in reference to no residential use, I agree that that should be scrapped. I'm not sure on the number 6 yet. I think we should really kind of look and see if we've done this anywhere else in any of the CDDs or any other places to be consistent. And then I have no knowledge really enough to give you comments because I didn't serve on the POCD committee, whether that makes sense in the POCD, if it's going to make a difference.
Okay, well, I can address a couple of things. I think what we have in front of us that David did is to take and scrap 317 1.9 totally and just go into multifamily residential. Mixed use is permitted. And I think that's a statement in and of itself without any other, I don't know.
Yeah, there's a couple.
I'm not sure, again, I'm all over the place too, but this is a kind of a combination of the mixed use where we were working in mixed use, trying to accommodate and encourage housing. David has come up with a sample language for us to start with. And I would ask any member or Amy to just chime in. If we're seeing this, I can't see anybody sort of waving their hand. So if it could be just informal and just speak up whenever you feel like you'd like to share.
Well, I would just say I'd like to encourage mixed use, but it doesn't, if those spaces are going to be vacant for stretches at a time, I don't know how productive that would be. So as long as we don't rule it out, I'm in favor of scrapping those, going with the new definition here.
So I have a position on mixed use. So by mixed use, just to be precise, mixed use means part residential, part commercial, correct?
It depends.
So
You have different uses that are in the zone. It could be a housing use with a commercial use. It could be a couple, and let me go back. Let me go back to
any two permitted uses each time.
Correct.
So you could have a small belt making company as the one use, whatever's a permitted use. So that the first.
Well, that's of a commercial nature of that. So that's a commercial use.
Yeah, I think that's pretty acceptable.
So we differentiate between, say, food and beverage establishments, so restaurants and businesses, professional offices, dry cleaners. Those are all specifically different uses under our regulations.
Yeah.
So,
but generally they would all fall into a category that common sense would call commercial.
Yes.
Yeah.
So right. So I'm gonna for our purposes, I'm gonna think of multi-uses or mixed use as being commercial and a residential component. Commercial of some kind. I don't think we need more commercial space in the city or more commercial uses in the city of Milford, in my opinion. I think we are going to see economic forces take hold in the next 2 to 4 years, where the commercial industry, we're going to be left with a glut of commercial properties. I'm not sure we should be building more commercial space. I think we need to focus on residential rather than mixed, at least at this time. I think we have a residential problem, not a commercial problem. There's a lot of vacancies and empty spaces for commercial within the environs of the city of Milford, including
Understood.
the CD2. That's my opinion.
So what do you think? We should permit it, but not like go through hoops to encourage it. We want to permit it if somebody wants it, but for the changes we want to make, focus more on putting some incentives in for developers to
build residential rather than commercial. Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
can I jump in for just a second?
Yeah.
Because I just want to go through quickly the rest of what we currently allow for residential, which will put it all into perspective.
That's exactly what I was going to say, David, was that my overarching, I haven't spent a lot of time looking at the CDD2 until today. And that is the one thing that jumped out at me, that if you're trying to encourage housing in the zone and some sort of affordable component, simplifying what's at least 3 or 4 different ways to have housing in the zone, and what you had up on the screen would certainly help. I think that was the overarching thing that looking at it sort of with fresh eyes, that was the one thing. So I think that that approach of trying to synthesize all of these things is the number one thing that I think you could do.
Right. And thank you. I agree. I like guests that like something that I do. So thank you. So we have so the next jump up, that's really what this is, from a 2-family house or that mixed use that was limited to 6 bedrooms, is what we call a multifamily, where at least 30% is affordable. We've had no development under this. There's no, and the key to this, why we've had no development is this. It's the 30%. If there is no
The lot size. The lot size is really big.
And that's
Or
later.
and the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other one, the lot
Okay.
size for this is big, but the other one's even bigger.
Yeah,
And
40,000.
yeah,
That's bigger.
So this one's bigger. This is 40,000. But again, as an 830G, who cares? I mean, they don't have to go by the lot size. They can just do something. There's no incentive here for anyone to develop anything, because we have these conditions that, I think when they were created, people thought, oh wow, this is much better than other things that the zoning regulations say in this zone. But everyone kind of forgot that, well, it doesn't really matter because they can propose something else.
Yeah,
So-
so
so
a
Dave, are you
couple
saying
things
that
that
this is,
I want to
yeah.
just echo that you're saying.
Sure.
First of all, that statement about 830G, we should really just rewrite this entire section. The 830G is a moot point because they don't need us to tell us they can do it. They can do it.
Right.
Now,
right.
now,
So it's
now
superfluous.
the only place that kicks in is if we ever got to 10%, and then using 830G wouldn't give them the free pass.
Correct.
And then they would still have to do it because we have it in our regs.
Right.
I don't foresee that
Happen.
in 10 lifetimes,
Right.
to be realistic.
So let me just go to the next thing that currently
Yep.
the regulations say we can do for housing, and then we now jump up from that I'll call it a modified 830G, which can be totally ignored, to these mixed use residential lots containing low-rise multifamily dwellings that are on 2 or more acres.
Yeah.
So we have basically 2 properties currently in the CDD2 that this would qualify for. One has been developed. That's the Beach Shore Village complex, and that was the thinking when this was created. And then the other property is the St. Gabriel's school property, which the city owns.
So they're exempt from.
And they're exempt from zoning. And as a matter of fact, the city bought the property under Mayor Blake's administration to prevent housing from going in, because there was a housing proposal for it. So I totally agree with you, Jim, that we should be probably removing some of these things, especially the 830G, and looking at something that promotes multifamily housing, as easy as possible, with taking into account the concept that you had talked about, which we can also put up, which has some sort of a sliding scale for affordability. And that combined perhaps with an incentive for that's under 30%, because that's an actual incentive for someone. If a developer can come in and they don't have to give 30% of the project, and it's something that's less, then that's really an incentive for someone to develop and give us something, versus what we have now, which is nothing.
So I think if we get rid of almost everything, what would we, if 40,000 is unrealistic, would we want to go down as low as 5,000 or maybe 10,000 or 8,000.
Well,
You know,
the minimum lot size in the zone is 2,000 square feet.
right, but so I'm saying to do a multifamily development.
I think
Right now,
5.
there's 40,000. We got to obviously reduce that. How low do we go? Would we?
I think my opinion is 5,000.
So that's an eighth of an acre.
But you can have a building that has 3 units on 5,000 square feet. You can have 4 units. I mean, we're talking, because once we get above a 2-family house, we're talking about multifamily
Yeah.
by our definition. So
And
Yeah.
the other thing I was going to say on that note is I think if you sort of mentally drive Naugatuck Avenue, with the exception of the commercial properties, which are obviously larger, if you think a lot about a lot of those houses that are existing, they're on small, modest sized lots. They're, and again, you may not, and one thing that I'll come back to sort of about the single and 2-family, and particularly the idea about the bedrooms and that kind of thing, is that, you don't have to think about this just in the, somebody's going to build 10 units, but if you can have somebody take what looks like, 2-family house like you have all along Naugatuck Avenue, or a single family house, and convert that into a 2-bedroom, a 2-family, or even a 3 or 4-family unit, but they're all 1-bedrooms. And maybe you get sort of naturally occurring affordable housing there without the restriction, or maybe you get somebody who can deed restrict one of those units. And so I think the idea of, particularly given these sort of the historic development pattern here, I think David's right that, yet again, that the smaller lot size is not going to be, completely out of scale with what's already there, and gets to this issue of, as you get to, if there's a house that somebody wants to buy, knock it down and put up something else, you're not focused on, well, I can't do anything because I need to consolidate lots of lots. Probably should have picked a better word, but
That's
that
it. Lots of lots.
yeah, lots of lots. And I think that was one of the things about the 40,000 square feet, is that then, if you wanted to take a, 2 lots that are smaller and, modest, and maybe get a smaller development, and you have a little bit of that, like I said, when you sort of either look on Google Maps or you actually drive, particularly down Naugatuck Avenue, and just kind of look at it, it's really a development that, or a stretch of road, and even just off of that, where it really is kind of a traditional smaller lot, naturally occurring, more affordable type of development. I don't think you need to just focus on, is it deed restricted? Obviously, there's a benefit to that, but there's also an opportunity with, something just, maybe it's more enticing to a developer who might do a smaller project.
So to
I
that point,
respectfully
Amy,
disagree with that one.
I agree. Thanks, Mark.
What you're opening, and respectfully, Amy, I mean, I'm not, this is just my opinion. I think you're opening up neighborhoods to multifamily, which is not what anybody wants. And that's part of the problem with 830G. And let me finish, Jim. When a developer buys a lot and puts up 11 units in a neighborhood, people don't like that. You open up parking issues, cars parking on streets. You turn a regular residential single-family neighborhood into now chopped up multifamily neighborhoods, which is, I don't think, what this should be about. It's almost similar to the ADUs and why people really didn't want the ADUs as well. It did the same kind of thing. I'm not saying I'm against larger spaces where you're going to put up 100 units on the Post Road or on Bridgeport Avenue, which is where they belong, not in neighborhoods. And
So David, while he's explaining that,
I grew up in West Haven, And if you drive down New Haven, West Haven off Campbell Avenue, this is what you see. And I don't want to see that in Milford. I'm sorry.
So
Right.
this-
So David, if you could just put up the map so that we can see where CDD2 is.
Yep.
It's primarily from Devon Bridge
yeah,
to McDonald's.
right.
And then it goes south to the water. And it's not very deep. So you're really looking at pretty much just Post Road frontage or Naugatuck Ave frontage. There is one road that sort of a little bit of a fork that goes off down by the old Simon Lake School, where there's Simon Lake Playground on one side and a lot of single family houses. And then when you get all the way down to the beach, it goes like one more street deep. But we're really pretty much street frontage on, fairly major roads. Obviously, Bridgeport Ave is major. Naugatuck Ave really isn't because it dead ends. But I was thinking of the zoning map actually.
Oh, the zoning map. Oh, okay.
Because
But-
it
I was
because
thinking,
it
David, while you're
identifies
there, because
CDD
I
too.
was looking at it. If you could look up 529 Naugatuck, I think that was the one that I was looking at.
And just to say something to Mark, we're looking at the CDD 2 zone, which is not a single family housing zone. It is it is a very mixed zone of commercial, of industrial, of there's some single families that are left, a lot of multifamilies, auto body shops. This is not a single family zone, and it's also by its nature basically one parcel in from the road, both on the Post Road and going down Naugatuck Avenue for the most part.
Right, but David, what Mark's point is that once you do this, you open the door to other zones having similar type of regulations. Now you open the
You don't.
floodgate.
You
No,
don't,
you don't.
because
From a legal perspective, you absolutely do not.
Yeah, there's no precedent kind of reality going on.
Yeah, that's what
Can you look at
what
that
my
on Street
concern is.
View? Does it let you go to the Street View?
That's
I'm
Church
I'm
Street.
using a different program, but I can go to the Street View. This is a different program that I have access to. So I'll go to Google Street View. Give me 2 seconds.
Yeah. And the reason because like I said, I was looking at it and I think to the question of, you don't want to open up, this area or some of the more traditional single family house neighborhoods to, big multifamily developments. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, and if this is the right address, it's a house. It looks like a single family house. From Street View, it looks like it's a 3-family house, not technically allowed in the zone. And this is it. And I think when you look at it, I guess I would ask you, like, do you really think this is out of character and character being, technically an impermissible consideration? But if you zoom in, there's 3 doors on that house. That doesn't look completely out of scale. It doesn't strike, it's not one of Bob Smith's developments, that are larger and that kind of thing.
And you want to know something? I think this is a rest home. This is not a regular house.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I'm pretty sure.
So that's the kind of thing that I'm saying is that if what you're trying to figure out is how to encourage some affordable housing, and you're able to look at things from a design perspective, from some of the criteria, you can get there without getting into the massive developments that you're worried about. It's just a matter of writing it into the regulations.
Already allowed in that zone right there?
Yeah.
It's left. So what are we doing then? If it's already allowed?
So a couple things. We're looking at what can be a carrot for more development. So let's say we want to target CDD2 as wanting someone to come in and say take one of those car lots with 400 cars on it and have it be economically viable for them to go and make an offer and buy it and turn it into 30 units, or to say, okay, the whole area needs economic development. Maybe somebody buys that place with 3 units in it and can knock it down and turn it into 7. And that becomes jobs. It becomes economic development for the area. You know, people walk over to get a fried chicken sandwich up the street, and just encourage development. And one of the concepts of doing that is, if we add housing, we want to have at least a little bit of an affordable component, so we don't go backwards in terms of our 830G compliance and, you know, potential to get another moratorium or whatever, or at least focus development where we kind of think, you know, right on Naugatuck Ave, right on the Post Road. That's better than, like, in my area, Meadowside Road, where a single family house turned into 12 units. So we're not doing that. We're trying to actually prevent that and give developers an opportunity to look at this area differently than they have in the past. This 40,000 square foot was a roadblock. And you know, even just removing the roadblocks would be good. But I think if we remove the roadblocks and we add in not 30%, but, you know, 10%, 15%, maybe a sliding scale for the 6-unit building, maybe you only have 1 affordable to comply with the new regs. But if you're putting up 30, maybe you have 5, you know, maybe, or 4, I don't know, to try to mitigate. What we have is that, you know, mostly understood or believed, you know, a lack of access for housing for certain economic realities.
Jim, can I ask you a question about that? What do you all think about the height requirement of the, I think you saw earlier about 60 feet. I think I read that somewhere.
40.
Where did I see 60?
On the incentive that I made up.
Oh, the incentive. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think 60 feet is okay. That's what, 5 stories?
yeah, 5 floors.
5 floors? You need, I assume you're gonna have an elevator.
Yeah, no, it might be parking underneath and then 4 stories of living if you know, if they were taking too much of the lot.
I think 60 feet's probably, I mean, I think that's reasonable. I think 60 feet is reasonable.
I just want to say something real quick.
I wouldn't go much. I wouldn't go above
5 stories in Devon.
I'm sorry?
Seems high to me. 5 stories in Devon seems really high to me.
So, on Naugatuck Avenue, north of the Post
Or
Road.
maybe.
Yeah, well, on north of the Post Road on Naugatuck Avenue, you know, you get into the HDD, you know, it abuts the HDD, which is 12 stories. But having said that, I just wanted to address something Mark said when he said, well, if this is already here, and it's already allowed, what you saw was a pre-existing non-conforming building in use. So that was created before the CDD2 was created. The CDD2 came into being in 2004, and like all the corridor zones, the board was trying to create a zone that would encompass all the different uses that existed in basically little teeny spot zones that had occurred over time. And that's what created the CDD zone. So that's why we have such diversity in uses. It's in the CDD2 is probably the most diverse of the CDD2s of the CDD zones.
Could you put up the either the POCD or the actual interactive zoning map, just so we can identify really precisely what we're looking at?
Yeah, I'd like to see the map too. And I think in the POCD, this is where we want to build these. We want developers to come in and build along these corridors.
So we need a carrot. We need a carrot because they haven't done it. First carrot is eliminate the 40,000 square foot. That was a roadblock.
I think we need to make it as simple as possible.
Right.
Yes, Amy, I think that was your point too, right?
Yeah. And let me,
Yeah, I mean, and I think again, because what you do is number one, you simplify the process because you don't have to acquire, particularly in this zone, you'll see it in the zoning map. Because that's where I started. When you look at all the small lots, to get to 40,000 square feet, depending on where you are, it's 4 or 5 or 6 or 7. Now imagine you're going to different property owners. So if you only had to buy 2 properties and you could redevelop something, that alone is going to create more opportunities because it's just it's easier. You have fewer people, you have fewer challenges and things like that. And then I think again, when you look at the map, even some of the larger lots, like you were talking about with the car dealerships or some of the sort of more historic, like what I would describe as heavy commercial type of things, are also, they're not on particularly huge lots, but they may not be 40,000. They might be 30, which is large for the zone, but not large enough to actually redevelop. Or the other one I was looking at was the one of the little shopping centers was, I think when I sort of did the rough measurements on it, it's probably 30,000 square feet. If you could just add residential above, think about what happened to town centers pre-zoning, that you had commercial or restaurant or whatever and residential above. You could do that, but some of the limitations that you have, like the 40,000 square feet or the height or some of the coverage requirements to get into parking, all start to limit that process.
40,000.
That's a very good point, because we have all these owner occupied retail buildings, single story. It would be great if we could give them the opportunity to put, I don't know, two floors of apartments above that as additional income. That could encourage the development of quite a bit of this more affordable inventory.
And actually help the people who live there now build some wealth with their
Exactly.
by maximizing
I think that's a no-brainer.
the use of their property.
I think it's a no-brainer.
I think that 40,000 square foot requirement that's from another time. It doesn't fit with how we're looking at this area, now. It's going to discourage investment.
If I could talk for a little bit, because it is my district along with the chairs. So on Bridgeport Avenue, as you're heading from the Naugatuck hitting Bridgeport Avenue, and you go up the hill, there's actually on the north side of Bridgeport Avenue 2 very large complexes. I'm guessing, and looking at the map pictures now, they're probably no higher than 40 feet. They might be 45 feet, but one is, my guesstimate, has 12 to 15 units of residential, it looks like. I don't know if they're single or double bedrooms. There's one on one corner, then you get a garage in between. So there's 2 of those already on Bridgeport Avenue. When you go down Naugatuck Avenue, some members of the board will remember, I think directly across from the house that Attorney Sochin showed us, we authorized, we could not object to an 830G, and it put in, I think, 4 units in what was originally maybe a 1 unit or maybe a two unit place. As you go farther down, before you get to the intersection where there's a commercial property, there's another residential unit. I think it has 8 units in there. That does not, according to my memory, to be an 830G, but that could have happened before we went there. And as you go further down towards Tudor Road, where St. Gabe's and Simon Lake is, there's a mixed building which has a single, looks like offices in the first floor, but second and third floors are residences, and across the street is townhouses, condos. So there's been mixed use in some portion of this district on Naugatuck Avenue. I want to point that out. And then when you get down to the very end, and I think that may be out of the CDD too, but there's a whole corner. It used to be the Walnut Beach Recreation Area. There's numerous units that went in there. So we should be mindful.
That is still CDD too.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the one thing that I just, I've listed all the comments, and I also spent time last couple of days reading that, or seeing the whole visual on the description of the 830G. I think that we have a responsibility to put into our zoning regulations that we should have affordable housing there and how we define it. And I don't disagree with the others that 40,000 feet is too much, 2,000 square feet might be too much. But I think that if we put into it, because I believe it's in our PUCD, and I believe we also signed an affordability housing plan sometime in the last couple of years, to put that in there. That being said, I suggest it's another argument that 830G is a general statute and the developers can come in and place that in front of the board, and we're faced with a problem. Now, my memory of the commentary, and if you haven't seen it, I think it's worthwhile to look at it. We shouldn't be afraid of 830G. We should try to embrace it because it does provide affordable housing for those that can't afford it. And I also suggest I use the term available housing, which is important. But, you know, we need housing there, and we need to find a way to do that. And it is limited by depth. I think that this most recent discussion we had in July, I think it was, on the diner property showed how deep it's not really that deep. And there was that extra property for making it a zone change. But, you know, it's really something on the streets. So in summary, I want to point that out, that there is a lot of these larger buildings and developments in the CDD2. Number two, I think we should have in our zoning regs at least a request or requirement that we do have affordable housing. I don't agree that this 317 2.4 is the best way to do it, but I think we should have it in there as we have it in the other districts. I think John Mortimer mentioned the CDD5. Thank you.
So this doesn't actually show the parameters, but you can describe it. Oh yeah, it's the light brown.
Yes, yeah. I'm having trouble pulling up our regular zoning map from our own resources. My computer, because when I run the meetings,
it takes a lot of RAM
resources.
actually.
Yeah, so I had it. I had partially, and then I went to refresh it and got nothing. But this is the CDD2 zone by, and it's broken out by use. It's considered. I think it's broken out in the PSC.
Okay, so because I know this pretty well, so obviously the 162 is the Devon Bridge up
right
to McDonald's.
Yep, here's the exit ramp from the highway.
Yep, and that purple right down by the river is a boat use district.
Correct.
Okay, now if we go down Naugatuck Avenue, that's pretty much, and we can do a little more depth on a map and see that that's pretty much one property deep in most areas.
Right.
When you get down to, right around there, we have the old Simon Lake School. We have
St. Gabe's,
the West Shore Rec Center.
Yeah.
When we go all the way down to the shoreline to where you are now, that is where Costa Azura was. There's the wedding facility. That's the church, and a few other properties. And then if you go up north, that is all Milford Beach Apartments and a condominium association, 2 condominium associations, I think. Heritage Sound, and then there is the senior housing that's federal.
Yes.
In that area. So
even I pulled up the map that has the lots if you want me to share it. So if anybody needs to see the small lots.
Sure.
Or that'd be sort of the lot lines.
Let me get out of this.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And
while she's doing that,
you can do that. Pull it up. You should be able to do it now. Let me get out of this.
So while you're doing that, I just want to share something that Brian Anderson sent. He said he couldn't make it, but that I said I would share this. I'd like to convey my strong support for additional affordable housing opportunities in Milford and believe that we should inventory city-owned vacant properties, blighted properties within districts being discussed. I'm also intrigued by the possibility of exploring 830G projects which could benefit residents who are older. As mentioned by attorney Sarah Sharp during our meeting with her. Overhouse and empty nesters are looking for alternatives that are scant in Milford at the moment. So I just told him I'd share that with the board.
So Brian makes a good point, which we didn't consider. Would any of the properties along the CDD2 area be conducive to senior housing?
It could be.
Yeah, and
Oh,
Yes,
so I'm
no.
sorry, I just want to clarify, I misspoke. The Milford Apartments, Milford Beach Apartments and those condos are in WDD, not in CDD2.
The beach shore is right at the edge.
Right, that's the mixed
That's the
use, and
boundary.
there's a couple buildings that are fully residential.
so you're talking about 55 and over?
Yeah.
Well,
Are there any properties in this area that would be conducive to a 55 and over community?
well, the question is how big? Because again, the two biggest, these are city-owned properties. So that leaves everything else. And keep in mind, 55 and over can go in any residential zone. So all the R zones can have 55 and over. But let's see if this zone actually calls it out.
does.
Special uses. So special uses.
But to your point, we could allow, say, greater density. But if we wanted to, we can, as Amy said, it's up to us to craft it, right? We
Right.
can say, we'll let you go up to 50 feet if you do affordable or age restricted, 55 and over. I mean, we could do that if that's what we felt. If we felt that was valuable, and again, we'd balance that with making stuff that is both valuable to us as planners, but also valuable to developers. I mean, I think you probably have smaller units and less cars if you're doing 55 and over, although maybe it would be 65 and over. I think 55 is like, these people are still carrying their own bag on the golf course.
Yeah, I mean,
That's a lot.
5 and 62 are the fair housing limitations.
What's that?
It's so for where you have to be careful is the Fair Housing Act kicks in, and the exceptions for what's literally defined as housing for older persons. The thresholds are 55 and older and 62 and older.
Okay. So there's two categories.
Hmm. Yep.
So we could, if we felt strongly about all of it, then you'd do category 1. If you feel 62 and over would accommodate fewer spots or whatever carrots we want to put out. But we could do it. Is my
I think
main point.
CDD3 might be more conducive towards senior housing, just given the bigger lot sizes, wider frontages.
I think we want to rule it out in CDD2 though. It's, it's right on the bus line.
I wouldn't rule it out, no, definitely, but I think CDD3 would be definitely the place where we really want to drill down on it.
So, you're talking about a housing. So when you talk about 55 and over, are you thinking of a particular form factor? Because there's really not going to be a difference in the form of the building, for when we allow housing. It's the form of the building is would fall upon whatever standards you want to put in there. But the last 55 and over that we built that's completed is on West Avenue, and then the latest one, and those are townhouses, and they take up a lot of land, and they have plenty of cars. And 55 and over just means, just to keep this in mind, that one member of the household has to be 55. They could have a spouse who's 30, and they could have kids. So it's really kind of a misnomer when you think, oh, it's a place that just has older retired people. That's not the case. And the one that that is currently finishing up is on Wheeler's Farm
Road.
Right. And the form factor there are, they're big buildings. They're big, you look at them and go, oh, those are apartment buildings. So, you have depending on who you talk to, there's probably a need at both ends of the spectrum. You need housing that people who are graduating from school, who want to move out from their parents' house, need to be able to afford for those first-time jobs, and in some cases their lifetime jobs, because they're going to be teachers or firemen, and they're not going to be doctors or lawyers. They're going to have a limited income in a very expensive state to live in. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the market, there are people who want to downsize from their big homes, and the size of the units may be very, very similar in what you're looking for. The ability of what people can pay are very, very different. Someone who's downsizing from their big home can probably afford to pay more for an apartment if it's available and something they like, than someone who's just starting out. So things to consider when you're talking about housing, and do you want to distinguish between the younger and the older, or you just want to create more housing stock so everybody can take advantage of it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think, but two prongs of the same fork there. But I just want to just reiterate that this is limited, right? Whatever we want to do to CDD2 is limited to CDD2. So we're not permitting anything up in the Gardens or in Grove Circle or in anywhere else. Just what we're doing is we're just following suit to a group that decided, okay, let's carve out these districts and create some regs that want to put a target for the developers. Here's where you could be successful if you do what we are hoping you'll do. So now we've got 15 or 20 years of experience and seeing what worked, what didn't work. And we do feel, I think collectively, that there is a housing shortage. And one way to mitigate it is to encourage it. And so, I don't know, David, if you would go over what your language incorporated, and then we can and anyone, please just pipe up anytime you want. But if we look at your language again and see if it's something that we feel comfortable with. One thing that I wanted to just bring up while you're working with the computer, David, is that, a lot of people talk about, well, let's go back to, when Milford was old Milford. At one point in the early part of the 1900s, there was probably 75 hotels within 100 yards of the shore in Milford. There was a trolley, there were, little convenience stores and butchers and just tons of stuff that was little hotels that were open in this winter, in the summer only. So some of these things can be an economic boom, and it's not just for developers. It's like, yeah, you got a single family house. Well, you know what? Why don't I put up a 5-unit guest house? And it creates wealth and helps existing Milfordites build some wealth and by maximizing the potential of their property. So I think that doing something here is a good thing, and I'd add either guest houses, I don't know if they're prohibited, or hotels, or try to bring some tourism. I don't know if we're going to need a full-on amusement park like we used to have, but anyhow, David, if you go over what you
Sure. So I was just throwing something together. Not a tremendous amount of thought went. I shouldn't say that, doesn't sound good either. This is sort of my first impression of something we could perhaps build on. Again, multifamily residential buildings meeting the following conditions, because we want to make it simple. Minimum 5,000 square foot lot. Obviously, that can be whatever the board wants it to be. Minimum front yard of 10 feet. That's consistent more or less with what that zone calls for, which calls for 10 feet, or the average of what's on the block. And that can be very sort of onerous. So I just went with 10 feet. minimum side and rear yards of 10 feet. Only because if we're going to go higher, you need to maintain the building. Where, by the way, in that zone right now, side yards and rear yards are either 0 or 4 feet, one or the other.
Yeah, the buildings can touch like they
The
do
building
in
can
Devon
touch.
Center, yeah.
Exactly. So this is just being practical, saying, buildings have to be maintained, give them 10 feet. The current regulations for everything in the zone is 40 feet in height. Accessory building setbacks, if you have an accessory building 4 feet from both the side and rear lot line, front yard setbacks the same as a principal building. That way, if you wanted, in this particular zone to have, a separate garage, it's just has to be in line with whatever the principal structure is. Parking, following just our regular parking standards. In this case, saying that, the parking should be, behind the principal use versus having it in the front yard. That's just nice. Everyone, I think, would agree that's just better. Okay, so great. So here's the ability of someone to come in now. They don't have to, they're not limited to a 1 or 2 family house. They're not constrained by a 40,000 square foot lot that has to be 830G or having 2 acres. This is the part that's missing, which is keeping development back. So this is the foundation. Now we want affordable housing. What do we do to sweeten the pot? To sweeten the pot, in my opinion, with affordable housing is the only thing that makes it sweet is if they don't have to provide 30% by state law, then that's the bonus. That's what makes it sweet. So they can get a density bonus. And in this case, I'm using as an example a development that provides affordable housing, under 830G. So for paperwork and all that kind of stuff, so it's consistent and it's deed restricted. 10% instead of the 30% of the proposed units at 60 and 80% of the area meeting, blah, 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 the same language that we would normally have. So, oh, wait a second, I can go and I can I only have to provide 10% affordable and I get a bonus. Well, what's that bonus? Why would I want to do this? Well, instead of 40 feet, you can go up 60 feet. So that makes it more dense. That could also offset, there's a cost to providing affordable housing, and we had a whole session about that, and I'm not going to go into that now, but that would help. You can have reduced parking, which may make sense depending on where it is in the zone, and that's at the applicant's discretion. They may not want reduced parking because they just assume everybody who's going to be there is going to have, a car. And these were sort of the two things that just sort of jumped out at me that were very sort of easy things. And there are probably other things that we could, put in here to sort of sweeten that. So this is just sort of a general, starting point, a discussion point. And now building onto that, as had been mentioned in the past, there were other ways of looking at this depending on the number of units that are being proposed. And, these numbers obviously are flexible. This is something that Jim put together. So depending on the 10% that we just saw on the screen, that may fall in here, that may not fall in here, but if something starts to get bigger, they would start providing more affordable units. Again, this is something that we would have to explore. We probably need to have more input, from, the private side of things to see, whether or not, these numbers are achievable, with depending on the number of units that are being built. Obviously, I think the more units that someone is able to build, they're able to better absorb, economies of scale. They're able to absorb having a higher percentage of affordability. I don't know where the cutoffs are. I don't know, gee, is it is 22% achievable if you've got 100 units where, at 81 units, it really doesn't work on their numbers. That
Yeah, I don't know
Totally.
either.
From
Yeah,
clients, just and from what I've read recently, particularly given construction costs, once you get beyond 15% affordable, without increased density, it starts, the math doesn't work. And that's on even on larger developments, clients or potential clients who are looking at, certainly at least 100 units, if not more. It's right around 15% that things get challenging to make the current construction costs, land costs, everything else work right now. Now, that's also a function of, construction costs are really high right now. Interest rates are really high. So, but I'm just throwing that out because it's something
And
that
we are
pretty
throwing him a carrot.
warmly.
We're giving him another 20 feet. So we're giving him density. Right. But I'm not in bed with these exact numbers, just some kind of a sliding scale. And I think that it's good optics, and it's actually, makes a little bit of a difference if you have 5 units or 6 units and you have at least one affordable, and it does get us some points. And so it's working towards a, and it's not the only goal is to work for a moratorium. So, but it's an important goal because it is, I think, unfair, and we've all talked about this ad nauseum, but putting these developments in a single-family neighborhood, and this has not been a single-family neighborhood for 20 years. So, and before that, it was just grandfathered in. I mean, I'm sure that the car lot I'm thinking of has been there since when they buried the cars when they were done with them. So.
This is the
I think I think I helped dig a hole actually when I was in a summer job to bury old engines. I don't know. I won't admit to that in court though. But yeah, so this I think is good. The parking I think is difficult to include because if you get down by the bridge, there's such a crunch on
sure.
On parking, and it might be just logistically prohibitive for someone to try to capitalize on that, but
and that was just thrown out as an idea.
No, I agree.
Yeah,
and I don't know that we're going to come up with final language tonight, but I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts and see if we can plan to bring this to the next Tuesday's meeting and talk about it in person and try to get language that we could circulate.
I think the issue is, sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Etan. I think it's a great idea, but if we could get copies of the documents that were just shown to us, it's titled Draft 11/13/24, we really appreciate it. And I do have one question, David. I understand we've got to get, by state statute, we got to get rid of these numbers of a 900 square foot, 2-bedroom, 800 square foot. But is there a correlation with the building code to what those numbers would actually be?
Yeah.
Are they workable?
The numbers are the minimum required by the building code.
Right, but I'm saying, can you give us a number that would help us assist to try to decide, how many square feet, then we can get an idea of that. I don't know if it's available.
Let me put it another way. You can't have anything in your regulations that talk about
No,
minimum
David, all he's asking you to do is help us out and show us what those numbers are in the building code. So then we can look at a property and visualize what it would look like.
Yeah,
that's
that,
all.
I can talk to the building department and get the minimum.
Yeah, just find out what the code is so that we know what we're.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Was that answering your question?
They're not
Mr. Chatty?
radically smaller. They're on the 1s and 2s, they're a little bit smaller, but they're not, it's not 200 square feet. It's my understanding.
And then they have different definitions for different room types that can affect the number, apparently. I had a discussion with our building department folks, a while ago. But yeah, I can let me talk to them and I can have that for you.
Excellent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm all set, and Etan had some questions, I believe.
Questions and comments. What we are talking about is limited to CDD2, correct? So when we go in front of the board, it's going to be limited only to CDD2 and not other zones, right?
Correct.
Okay. The goal, as I understand it, is to increase the housing supply, irrespective of the nature of said supply. Is that my understanding?
I think that's accurate. I think that we are, with the only caveat being that we want to include some affordable component in any multifamily development.
So the goal then is to increase supply of whatever type the market decides,
Yeah.
plus supply with whatever, with what the market decides. That also includes an affordability. And by affordability component, you mean affordability component consistent with section 830G of the Connecticut
Yeah,
General
just, and the only thing that would be is that they have to report and they have to match the number that is calculated by the formula, 80% and 60% of the mean income. And then you take, I don't know whether it's 27% of that is your monthly income is what you can afford for rent. Is that pretty close, Amy?
It's, yeah, really close. And then the one important component is that it's also adjusted for unit size. So if you had the extremes being the maximum rental amount, maximum income amount for a studio is obviously very different than the maximum income amount for a 3-bedroom, even if they're both at 60% area median. So you're adjusting for basically the household that is living in the type of unit.
Okay. So the per square foot price changes drastically from a studio to a 3-bedroom.
Yeah.
It's based on occupants, not
Yes.
necessarily square footage.
Oh, a number of bedrooms.
Because there's an
No
assumption of,
occupants, not,
Yeah,
sorry.
gotcha.
right, there's an
we're not
assumption of
going
how
in to
many
see
people are
how many
living in a
kids are in the
bedroom.
bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have that issue when you're dealing with 65 and over. 65 and over, there's no kids. It's essentially 1-to-1.
That's
Hey,
not true. That's
you
not
never
true.
know. I still kind of want one more.
That's not true. You can have 55 over, 65 over, you can have kids. Because you can have, I don't know, maybe it's time for a trophy wife. And well, my wife couldn't hear that. She's in the room. But
Or
I
a
could have,
roommate.
yeah,
The more
or-
typical
yeah.
might be a roommate.
Yeah.
I'm 80 years old and I live with my sister. You could,
Or my daughter or my son, who's a single father.
Right.
So I think that the overarching policy that we need to discuss is, in my opinion, is we need to boost supply. And I think anything that we can pass to boost supply, we have to do it within the confines of 830G. So I'm in favor personally of anything that's going to substantially boost supply in this zone. And we can obviously look at other zones later, but we have a supply crunch. And if we can convert commercial to residential to alleviate that crunch, I'm all for it.
I will leave you with one other thought to think about, particularly because of how you have this set up right now. If there are things that you are comfortable with, meaning, obviously right now, single and 2-family units are permitted uses by site plan. To the extent that there is a development scenario that you are comfortable with, is basically taking from what David has as, multifamily, 5,000 square feet, front yard, side yard, etc. Right now, it's set up that they're coming to you for, believe it's for a special permit. And to the extent that there is something you are comfortable with that could make it a site plan use, maybe you allow 3 families if it's a larger lot, or you're okay with a certain size, adding the discretionary approval process does it adds time and money. Obviously just showing up at a hearing is one thing, but I think there's probably some scenarios where, the picture we pulled up before, that if there was a scenario where, if it was a 1.5 times the minimum lot size and you had a 3-family, would you be okay with that coming in on a site plan application? That I would just encourage you to think about if there is a way to make some of these elements site plan applications. It does help timing and cost.
Right, so just we want to avoid coming to the board with something that we've already thought about and we've already approved.
Exactly.
And do you have either a recommendation or a best practice from somewhere else that you don't need to share right now, but if you could share it with David, or if you know it now, fine.
I'll think about, anything else, but I'm sure you probably also have some other, between David and I, we could probably think of some of the other zones or some others, but it's just, to your point, it's exactly that. You've thought about it, you're comfortable with it, and it doesn't need, you're not worried about traffic, you're not worried about parking because there's, one parking space or 1.5 parking spaces, whatever it is, you're comfortable.
So we're really
Simplifying
creating a
that makes
bullseye
it-
for the developers. This
Yeah.
is the target and here's the bullseye. If
Right.
you do this, you don't even have to go to the board.
Yeah, and when you think about it, that's what we do with basically 1 and 2 family houses. We don't get a lot of new 2-family houses, but 1-family houses, you look at the R zone, it's got your minimum lot, your minimum front yard setback, side yards, and the height, and those are all things right out of the regulations, and they don't come to you. We just give them.
So, yeah, so let's think about a threshold where
Right.
we can put the bullseye. I think we put this on the on the agenda for the next meeting, David, and if we can agree on final language with the rest of the board, then we have a motion to circulate it. If not, we keep it open and put it on the next meeting or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's a work in progress, and
I think we're close, though. I think the main thing is eliminating 40,000 square feet. And the next is coming up with some kind of an affordable component that works for developers. And then as Amy has recommended, we lower the bar for just getting approval out of your office.
Okay.
I think those are the 3 things for me that are real deal carrots.
Can we get some developers out to the next meeting?
No, because we would have to have it as a public hearing, and we can't at this point.
Or we could have another special meeting and invite a developer.
Or
Let's
we
do
could have
that. That sounds great.
So
Is that what you're in favor of, John?
Yeah, let's get some developers out here. Let's hear them chime in on what's actually going to make stuff pencil out, as far instead of just spitballing like, oh, this sliding scale, whatever arbitrary number we come up with. At least we're working in the real world with something that's going to make sense.
Okay. Would you be satisfied if David just floated a question to a couple of developers well, they're not going to like the sliding scale no matter what. They would prefer no affordable component. But I was hoping to move
And
it
I
down
think
quicker,
understanding, to that target point, I think if they understood, and frankly, it's conversation I was having with a potential client recently, that, as more towns have started to ask about, an affordable component, it's really much like the site plan. If you know what the standards are, you can evaluate whether or not it's going to work. It's when you're not really sure and kind of getting into some of those discretionary approvals that it gets harder, that, you have a concept laid out, and then and it's not just affordable, it could be anything. But that's where it gets hard for most of our clients, that it's the unknown of the process, and whether that's a new affordable component or a traffic light or, street improvements, whatever it is, trying to have that criteria laid out really does make it easier.
Okay.
Amy, is it also easier to have a fixed percentage of affordable as opposed to a sliding scale?
I think that might depend. I'd probably defer to somebody who does more construction there, because that's where my knowledge starts to fall off is where, there's obviously an economy of scale that if you're building a single family house, that's one thing. And if you're building, different units inside a certain size building and you have, whether it's firewalls or just extra doors or extra whatever, that's why I'm not really sure on that component. And I think it would be helpful to get some sense from, particularly from some of the smaller scale developers who might take advantage of the CDD2. I think that would be helpful for you.
I think John Agnese's point then is well taken.
So can we put this on Tuesday's agenda and have it be a public hearing on CDD2 and invite a couple of developers to speak as well as the public?
No, because
We missed the deadline?
It's not a special meeting, and because of that, it's a regular meeting. I'll have to look at that. I don't think we can do it at this point.
If it's a regular meeting, you can check Robert's rules and frankly FOI, but if it's a regular meeting, you can add something to the agenda. The issue would just be motion and getting people, but no, you can't have the public hearing yet.
Yeah, I mean, we can add things to that. We can add things to the agenda. Clearly, I know we can do that, especially since the agenda is going to be probably finished tomorrow. But yeah, we can't. It's too late to have it.
It's too late to have a public hearing, but is it too late to invite a speaker or two?
That's a public hearing.
Even if it's an invited speaker.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you concur, Amy?
I'm really advising at the moment, but I think it depends on, is it a true public hearing? It's not advertised as one, but it's a public meeting. So I think the question is just, what do is it somebody like me saying, hey, here's what I think, and you're basically taking input from somebody in formulating something? Yeah, I mean, I think it ultimately depends on what you're comfortable with and what the sort of true city attorney's office has advised.
I was just hoping we could move it forward at the next meeting. But
we're not voting. If we're not going to vote or make a decision on it,
no, we would just circulate it. I guess we would have a public hearing and could invite developers specifically to speak at the public hearing after it's circulated. And then if it's not a major change in the language of what was circulated, we could, make minor alterations before we approve it. Would that be to address your concern, John?
I mean, again, I don't think there's any need to rush this. I mean, I think we ought to be very methodical about this. Let's hear what the developers have to say, and then we can put the reg together and vote on it. Yeah.
I'd like to push it quicker, but in deference to you, I'll say we'll have another special meeting in the new year, and we will invite a couple developers and get their input. And between then and now, the members are encouraged to do their own little bit of research for any best practices they could find, and make sure that we're getting it right. I think your instinct is good, John, to not jump into it. I mean, I've been thinking about it for a year and working on it, so I am more anxious, but I think in deference to you and your sentiment, I think is a good one. So
I personally like the idea of a public hearing with or public meeting, whatever you want to call it, with the developers. That way members of the public can come and chime in and ask questions at the same time.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my preference.
I think it makes sense. Yeah.
That's me. I mean, you're the chair. You decide. That's my preferences. Members of the public can come too, not just the developers. Have everybody in the room.
Understood. Okay.
Agree with Eitan. I think that would be. I'd like to hear the voices of the developers and the general public as well.
Okay, that's what we'll do. We'll set that up for next year, January, David, and we'll invite maybe we'll invite the third district alders and,
Yes.
and Board of Ed folk to, give their perspective as well.
Yep.
Anything else before we, adjourn outside of, we'll get a motion to approve the last minutes if anyone read them?
Yeah, Mr. Hirsch raised his hand. He's gonna make the motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I thought
Second.
John was gonna
Seconded.
second.
Okay,
Without objection. And special thanks, Amy, to you for your time and your insights. Very valuable and
Absolutely.
very much appreciated.
Of course.
yeah, thank you, Amy.
Happy to help.
Thank you, Amy.
Everybody.
I think our
Good night.
business here this night is done.
It is.
Have
We
a
are
great night,
adjourned.
everyone.
Good
Good
night,
night, guys.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.